Congressman LaTourette, thank you for joining us this week.
Yep.
So, we got a busy week going on here. Things happening, things not happening. Let's start off with some stuff that is happening right now. We've been talking about the budget for the last couple of weeks. We finally have a budget agreement between the House and the Senate. The House is likely to take the budget up today. The Senate's going to take it up next week. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on.
Well, it's a giant step forward because a lot of times you don't get both houses passing a budget. That's happened, and you really don't get a conference report where the two sides have agreed or the two houses have agreed. You also have that announced this week that there's a budget agreement. As you indicated, the House is supposed to vote on it on Thursday, and then the Senate will vote on it next week. It's expected to pass in both chambers. Like a lot of budget documents, however, it's a political document rather than a governing document. It would balance the budget within 10 years. It cuts spending by over $5 trillion over 10 years, which is really not sustainable. And it also doesn't raise any revenue that's not budget neutral. And so there's no increased revenue as a result of tax reform or anything else, which is going to be a problem and a non-starter with Democrats. It also repeals Obamacare. And the next step would be what's called reconciliation, where the budget would have instructions, specific instructions, directing the people writing the spending bills to defund and basically remove the 2010 Affordable Care Act from the books. That, of course, isn't likely to happen either. but it is. I mean, it's a step forward, and it's a step forward in that it's, I think, only the third time since 1974 that you have a budget agreement that is going to be subject to reconciliation. And it'll now allow the appropriators in both the House and the Senate to move forward with numbers to begin to write the appropriations bills, and that process has already started.
Well, and you mentioned the appropriations process starting. And the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, has said that he would like to see each one of the appropriations bills pass this year, return to regular order, something we've talked about the last couple of years. But the first bill, the kind of arguably the easiest one, the military construction and VA benefits appropriations bill, has been held up. There's a problem with that. So do you think it's likely, or not even likely, is it possible for them to pass all of the individual appropriations bills in this environment?
Absolutely not. And even if it wasn't this environment, it's not going to happen. There are a couple bills, like MILCON, military construction bill, the defense bill, the transportation bill, some other things are going to pass. But when you get down to where the money is, if you will, on the discretionary side, the Labor, Health, and Human Services bill, they're now saying that they don't even know if they can write one. Because with sequestration, with the budget caps from the Budget Control Act, those numbers are so severe that, first of all, the Democrats have already announced that any appropriations bills that hews to this budget, that they're going to vote against. So you can't count on any Democratic support. And the Republicans are going to begin, for a variety of reasons, to peel away. You're going to have centrist Republicans peel away because they're not happy with the level of spending, it being too low. And you're going to have conservative Republicans say they don't want to spend anything. And so as a result, it's going to be very difficult to get to 218 votes. That's one. Two, what they found out with the MILCON bill is, even though it is a worthy and lofty goal to let all these bills be considered in regular order, and what that means is that they would come to the floor, and if you as a member have an amendment that you think you want to offer, you debate it, you get a vote on it. What's been happening in recent years is that people have been abusing that system, and they've been filing hundreds and hundreds of silly amendments. A few years ago, there was an amendment, for instance, to take away the money for President Obama's teleprompter, and you know, that's cute, it's funny, but it's not worth hogging up a half an hour of congressional floor time, and it's not really a valid legislative exercise. But you have that kind of shenanigans going on. So I think the opportunity to pass all 12 bills is impossible.
Well, it's not all bad news. And we've talked recently about how there's kind of been this change in kind of the conventional wisdom here on the Hill. Earlier this year, it seemed like maybe nothing was going to get done. You know, we seemed like there was lots of infighting, particularly in the House among Republicans. Suddenly, that dynamic has shifted pretty dramatically. And this week we saw something called the 21st Century Cures Initiative. Talk to us a little bit about that. And what does that mean in general about the ability to get things done here in Washington?
21st Century Cures Initiative is the brainchild of Fred Upton, who's the chairman from Michigan of the Energy and Commerce Committee. And rather than produce a partisan bill, he reached out to woman by the name of Diana DeGette, who's the lead Democrat from Colorado. And he also, during the State of the Union address, the administration reached out to Chairman Upton and said, this is something that we think we can work together on. And 21st Century Cures, basically, a lot of the research at the Institutes of Health and other places is geared towards finding a cure tomorrow. This bill would be designed to take those things that are ready to go today and actually provide relief to the patients who need it today, not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now. And, you know, although there's still some work to do on the bill, and it's not perfect at this moment in time, they did roll out a committee draft this week that's bipartisan. It's expected to pass the committee. It's expected to get a favorable review in the House and the Senate, and as I said, from the Obama administration. And this is another opportunity for that segment of the Congress that actually wants to govern and work together and find solutions to things to do that. And that's an encouraging sign. The more of these sort of good government things that they can accomplish over the next month or so, then builds the foundation when they have to go into some of the more thorny issues. And so it's nothing but good news.
Well, and you've talked before about the kind of lack of trust between all the parties that are operating. Yeah. So is it these, not that the 21st Century Cures Initiative is a smaller thing, right, but it is compared to things like some of the more intractable issues we're facing, like, you know, the Highway Trust Fund and other issues like that. Does these smaller victories build up some of the trust so that you think that it could actually allow the parties to kind of deal with some of these bigger issues?
Yeah, you still have pretty insurmountable differences between not only the parties but within the parties on a number of these big bills. But you're right, it does develop and continue to create a culture of trust that doesn't exist. And so when you're dealing with somebody and you can trust that person, you may not like that, and at the end of the day you can't reach an agreement, but it's not that you're suspicious that they're not being square with you. So the answer to your question is yes.
Well, the last thing I wanted to close with is we've had a lot of conversation this year about kind of divisions within the Republican Party. And one of the perks of being in the minority usually is it's pretty easy to kind of hang together, right, because basically your job is just to say no to everything that the majority comes up with. Well, we've seen an issue over the last couple of weeks that's actually been dividing the Democratic caucus, and I wanted to talk to you about it. And that is over the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right, free trade agreement in Asia, and particularly over the question of whether or not to give President Obama so-called fast-track authority to negotiate the deal, something that obviously the White House supports. Right. Republicans support it. Democrats are deeply divided over it. Talk to us a little bit about this.
Well, there's actually a couple of divisions that are interesting. This is one of those issues where the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the very conservative wing of the Republican Party have gone so far that they've actually met in the middle. And so you have Tea Party members together with members of the Democratic Party who do not want to give and are under the belief that these free trade agreements cost Americans jobs. And so they are not in favor of it. The counter-argument is, well, if you don't go into these markets, you leave it to the Chinese and you leave it to the Europeans, and you're absent without leave from these markets, and you're not competing, you're not exporting. And there are a number of examples of that. And so at the end of the day, I think that the Trade Promotional Authority will pass with both Republican and Democratic support. But the unions, for instance, are very much opposed to this fast-track authority. They have been against most, if not all, of these free trade agreements, and they're going to continue to do that, and that creates a lot of pressure on the Democratic side. Now, the counterbalance to that is you do have some pro-trade Democrats, a lot of them from California, Silicon Valley, and places where export is really an important part of their economy. And so it's going to be an interesting little bit. It's expected to come to a head next week. And if they have the votes, they'll proceed. But today's news was Vice President Biden is actively engaged on behalf of the administration, coming down to the Hill and buttonholing Democratic lawmakers to get as many of them as he can to be supportive.
By the way, does it say something about kind of the White House relationship with the Hill, that President Obama is not the point person to come down and talk to Democratic members? That Biden is you know what I mean? And I understand Biden served, Biden served in the Senate for a very long time, so he's got institutional knowledge. But there's always been rumblings here in D.C. essentially that the relationships have never been good, not just between Republicans in Congress and the White House, but even Democrats and the White House.
I think Vice President Biden has decent relationships, and that allows him to come down to the Hill and have these conversations. The president's still the president. He can pick up the phone and talk to anybody he wants, and I know that he'll be doing that as this vote gets to be closer. But you're right, when it comes to somebody who you actually know and you've had dinner with or something like that, it's Vice President Biden and not the president.
Final exit question. Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont, announced today that he is running for president as a Democrat.
Right.
Should Hillary Clinton be worried?
Well, Las Vegas, the odds makers came out and said that his chances are slim and none. So I'm gonna go with that.
You're good with that? All right. Will be interesting, at least entertaining to watch as this plays out. So, Congressman LaTourette, thanks for joining us this
Good
week.
to see you.